monthly meetings with them, resources sent on WhatsApp, but making this professional development on a continuous basis. That's what is required on an in-service thing. So these were my 4 suggestions for what Odisha can do further.
Yes, sir. And I think it will also be important to maybe learn from others who are doing well, because education has attracted the attention of many state governments now, and we can also see a healthy competition, which is improving the learning outcome of everyone, every child. Now, when we talk about experiences in other states, CSF that you represent, ma'am, is one organization that has been working with other state governments. So, since you are also partnering with us in Odisha, is your strategy in Odisha informed by your experience in other states? And what is it that we can also learn from them?
Thank you. I do believe there is a mutual learning which goes on. With when you work with say Central Square Foundation or any other CSOs, when you work with the government, there is a mutual learning takes place. You know, the kind of the expertise that comes from the department, the people who have been working in for a large period of time, and the expertise or even different perspectives that the CSOs can bring. Like, so I'll tell you a couple of things that has really worked well so far, and what we can learn, and we have a lot learned more than what we've been able to contribute as well. So, for example, Dheer talked about foundational learning, and CSF works closely, mainly on foundational learning. To conduct a baseline survey, looking at literacy and numeracy from grade 1, 2, or 3, and then by subtasks, being able to plot the result in terms of percentage of students who are doing more than 70%, for example, as a green, or those who are between 50 and 70%, and those who are below that, helps you to create strategy for each of the specific learning subtasks. And I think that kind of result, not so much is at aggregate level in percentage how well one is doing, but subtask, so that it helps the SCRTs, the diets, the teachers to say, where should we put our attention? Which are the competencies our children are not? Sorry for that. Our children are not good at, and that being able to communicate effectively up to the last teacher. Very often I feel that the other piece that I want to talk about is creating confidence amongst our teachers. It's very interesting. I'll just cite an anecdote today. This morning I was going around with a colleague of mine and looked at a number of temples. I have been earlier here to Konark and other temples. Not only the art and architecture, even the weaving, the industries, that what fine amount of work which is done. All of that requires mathematical skill in terms of estimation, in terms of geometry, in terms of being able to produce that. If hundreds of years back we could do it, today we need to have confidence that our children and our teachers know and can do. I think one of the first thing I would say that. So that is one of our big learning, that when we closely work with the teachers or work even with mainly with the system, I think there is so much knowledge which resides there. All partnerships, so I want to also say, any partnership requires both learn from each other and gain from each other. If it is only one-sided, that's not a partnership. It will always have an imbalance. So I do want to start by saying that. Besides the assessment that I talked about, the other thing which is in a very, very beautifully crafted monitoring system, all virtual, all online, and it has just started, but observations in the classrooms. From starting with the secretary in a particular state, secretary to everybody, whoever goes to the classroom, on the same parameters, they work with the teachers, give them feedback. I think that has worked really, really well. What I understand in Odisha, among many states don't have that advantage. What you have is you have a large number of, what would I say, is mentors, like BRCs, CRCs, I don't know the nomenclature, but the span ratio is really good, from anything between 12 schools to 25, which is brilliant. Teachers need somebody to, it's not even to just teach. That is another thing we learn. When somebody comes and looks at my work, I feel that somebody cares and therefore I continue to be better. So somewhere it is motivational, as long as we are not constantly giving critical feedback, but also encouraging the teachers. I think some of these things we have really truly learned that helps.
It's very useful, ma'am. And I think from a public policy perspective, this also brings us back to the issues with respect to, let's say, monitoring. We can give the training, but how do you make sure that it happens at every school? So again, the issues with respect to concurrent monitoring, and this is something that I would like to listen to all three of you, starting with you, ma'am. And because whenever we are implementing something at scale, there comes the issues of monitoring and then finding out who are the early adapters, how do you encourage them? So in that sense, do you have any suggestions for us?
Before I start with the suggestion, I do want to say that the last point which was made by the director in terms of the recently started individual award that was just announced recently, I believe. Absolutely, I think incentives help. What one has to be careful is how do we have a criterion which seem not only are just, but also seen to be just. That as we give awards to students, teachers, anybody, I think making sure that a very good criterions are set and those awards are given. I think it's obviously one of the first things. Coming to specific monitoring, because monitoring will lead to identifying those champions, so to say. I think what we monitor is very important. Very often, I don't know, I'm not sharing about Odisha because I really don't know. But very often what tends to happen, it's about infrastructure. It's about, comings and goings. I think one of the first thing I would like to say, do we create studies? So monitoring could be regular basis, monitoring could be even regular studies. How many studies get done on time, what we call it a time on task? How many hours in a week children are learning literacy, numeracy? Because these are the two critical skills that they need to learn in order to be able to learn further. How many hours are spent on it? Do we know that? Attendance, students